Hi, my name is Ashley Hall, and I am a prevention specialist with Wellness Point. To conclude our presentation on methamphetamine today, I'm going to talk about the stages of the meth experience. I got my resources from www.drugfreeworld.org. So here are some of the faces of meth abusers. We have our before pictures, which we can see at age 31. This young lady looks pretty normal. Age 33, which is only 2 years difference, the facial features start to change. And 1 year later, age 34, she looks totally different. We also have some other before and after pictures here. And as Ms. Deborah discussed earlier, with the use of meth, it could also cause tooth decay. Here are some pictures of meth. You have your pink crystal, you have your powder, you have your yellow crystal, you have your blue crystal, and you have your regular crystal, which is also known as ice. Here are some ways that meth is used. It can be smoked, it can be injected, it can be snorted, and it can also be ingested. And here you have the pipe, which meth can be smoked in. So now, let's talk about the meth experience. First, you have the rush. The rush is an initial response the abuser feels when smoking or injecting methamphetamine. During the rush, the abuser's heartbeat races and metabolism, blood pressure, and pulse soar. The rush can continue for up to 30 minutes. After the rush, you have the high. The high is sometimes called the shoulder. During the high, the abuser often feels aggressively smarter and becomes argumentative, often interrupting other people and finishing their sentences. The abuser can become excessive compulsive, and the high can last from 4 to 16 hours. Next, we have the binge. The binge is uncontrolled use of a drug or alcohol. It refers to the abuser's urge to maintain the high by smoking or injecting more meth. The binge can last 3 to 15 days. During the binge, the abuser becomes hyperactive both mentally and physically. So after the binge, we have what we call tweaking. Tweaking, a methamphetamine abuser, is most dangerous when experiencing a phase of the addiction called tweaking, a condition reached at the end of the drug binge when the meth no longer provides a rush or a high. During tweaking, intense itching is common, and a user can become convinced that bugs are crawling under the skin and unable to sleep for days at a time. More about the meth experience. Next, we have the crash. And some of us are familiar with the crash, not related to meth. The crash, to a binge abuser, the crash happens when the body shuts down, unable to cope with the drug effects, overwhelming it. This results in a long period of sleep for that person. So now let's talk about the meth hangover. After the crash, the abuser returns in a deteriorated state, starved, dehydrated, and utterly exhausted physically, mentally, and emotionally. This stage ordinarily lasts between 2 and 14 days. And lastly, we have the withdrawal stage. Often 30 to 90 days can pass after the last drug use before the abuser realizes that he is in withdrawal. First, he becomes depressed, loses his energy, and the ability to experience pleasure. Since meth withdrawal is so painful, most abusers often revert. Thus, 93% of those in traditional treatment return to abusing methamphetamine. Now, I have a couple of testimonials here that I'm going to read from meth users. My life spun out of control after a simple girls' night out to alleviate my boredom. After being introduced to meth for the first time at age 40, within 3 years, I was shooting meth. I left my husband and my 3 children, ages 10, 12, and 15, and ended up living on the streets. This is Maria. Another testimonial. Welfare money was not enough to pay for our meth habit and support our son, so we turned our rented home into a meth lab. We stored the toxic chemicals in our refrigerator, not knowing that the toxins would permeate the other food in the icebox. When I gave my 3-year-old son some cheese to eat, I didn't know that I was giving him poison food. I was too stoned on meth to notice until 12 hours later that my son was deathly ill. But then I was so stoned, it took me 2 hours to figure out how to get him to the hospital, which was only 5 miles away. By the time I got to the emergency room, my son was pronounced dead of a lethal dose of ammonium hydroxide, one of the chemicals used to make meth. So we'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to our presentation on today. And always follow us on Facebook at Strengthening Families Youth Prevention and on Instagram, Youth Prevention 2020.